Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Speak Smart podcast. Today, we're going to be unlocking the secrets to English fluency. We've got a mountain of tips and techniques from those who've already kind of climbed this mountain. And trust me, it's not about reaching some impossible peak of perfection. It's about communicating effectively with that smooth, natural flow you get when you've really mastered something. Like driving a car after tons of practice. You're not thinking about every little movement you just drive.
Yeah, what's fascinating is how many parallels there are between learning a language and learning any other complex skill. That feeling of effortlessness comes from consistent practice, and importantly, from viewing mistakes not as failures but as feedback.
Okay, let's unpack this idea of mistakes. It's so easy to get discouraged when you stumble over words or get the grammar wrong.
Right. Imagine learning to ride a bike. You wouldn't expect to hop on and glide off perfectly right. You'd fall, but you'd wobble. But each time you'd adjust, learn something new about balance. Language is the same. Every mistake is data. It's showing you where to fine-tune your pronunciation, where to tweak your grammar.
So instead of cringing at every error, we should be thinking, aha, valuable information.
Precisely. The fear of making mistakes is a fluency killer. It makes you hesitant. It blocks that natural flow. The more you embrace those mistakes, the more you free yourself to just talk.
That makes so much sense. But we're busy people. What if we can't dedicate hours every day to studying?
Consistency is key, not intensity. Think of it like building a muscle. Short, regular workouts are more effective than one giant session every now and then. And here's the cool part. You can weave English practice into your daily life without it feeling like study.
Our sources had some really clever ideas for this. What jumped out at you?
The chef in the kitchen technique really resonated. Instead of just narrating your routine, imagine you're a chef meticulously describing each step of a complex recipe in English. First, I finely diced the onions, careful not to shed a tear. The level of detail forces you to think and speak more precisely.
I love that. It reminds me of another technique our sources emphasized: active listening. It's not just about hearing English, it's about actively decoding it, almost like a detective trying to crack a code.
Right, and like a detective, you're picking up on subtle clues that unlock the mystery of natural speech. By immersing yourself in English podcasts, music, movies, your brain starts to internalize the rhythm in the intonation, even if you can't consciously explain the grammar rules. It's amazing how our brains absorb language even when we're not studying in the traditional sense.
So let's say our listener is motivated, they're practicing consistently. What about vocabulary? There's this myth that you need to memorize the entire dictionary to be fluent.
It's true that vocabulary is the building blocks of fluency, but you don't need to become a walking dictionary. Instead of trying to learn every word under the sun, think about your interests, your goals. Are you passionate about cooking? Build your culinary vocabulary. Are you a tech enthusiast? Focus on terms related to your field. This targeted approach is more efficient and keeps you engaged because it's relevant to your life.
So instead of randomly memorizing words, we're curating our own personal vocabulary toolkit, tailored to what we actually need and use.
Exactly. And just like any toolkit you need to keep those tools sharp, frequent review is essential. Flashcards, word lists, even fun online quizzes. Whatever works for you to keep those new words fresh in your mind.
Now, our sources were full of creative ways to immerse yourself in English beyond formal study. This English bubble concept really stood out.
Think of it as surrounding yourself with the language, creating an environment where you're constantly exposed to it. Switch your phone and computer settings to English, read those pesky English labels at the grocery store, start following English-speaking social media accounts. You can even try thinking in English throughout the day, translating your thoughts into the language. It might feel strange at first, but it gets easier with practice.
It's almost like giving your brain an English workout, even when you're not actively studying. Speaking of workouts, let's tackle a challenge that a lot of language learners face: confidence. You might know the grammar, you might have a decent vocabulary, but actually speaking can feel terrifying.
Confidence is like the fuel that powers fluency. If you're constantly second-guessing yourself, afraid of making mistakes, you're less likely to speak freely and naturally. One powerful technique is to start small. Instead of aiming for those long, complex sentences, master the art of short, impactful phrases.
So instead of stumbling through, "I'm doing very well, thank you. How are you?" you'd go with a confident, "I'm good, thanks."
Exactly. Each successful interaction, no matter how small, builds your confidence. It's like leveling up in a video game. You start with simple tasks, gain experience, and then tackle bigger challenges. And here's a fun tip: practice in front of a mirror. It might feel silly at first, but it helps you get used to seeing yourself speaking English and observing your facial expressions and body language.
It's like giving yourself a mini presentation, getting comfortable with how you look and sound when speaking English. Our sources also mention role-playing as a confidence booster.
Role-playing is a fantastic way to practice real-life conversations in a safe space. Imagine scenarios like ordering food at a restaurant, asking for directions, or even having a job interview in English. You can do this with a friend, taking turns being the customer and the waiter, or even by yourself, talking through different situations.
It's about getting comfortable with the flow of conversation, responding naturally, and building that muscle memory for real-world interactions. Now let's move beyond the basics and talk about speaking naturally. It's not just about knowing the words, it's about using them with the right rhythm, intonation, and those subtle nuances that make you sound like a native speaker.
This is where things get really interesting. Think about music. A melody isn't just a sequence of notes, it's the rhythm, the pauses, the dynamics that bring it to life. Language is the same. Intonation, the rise and fall of your voice, adds emotion and emphasis to your words, making you sound more engaging.
So for example, when asking a question, our voice naturally goes up at the end, right?
Exactly. And when making a statement, it tends to go down. It's these subtle cues that add meaning and make your speech more expressive. Rhythm is equally important. It involves grouping words together naturally, creating that smooth, effortless flow we talked about earlier. English has a distinct rhythm that involves stressing certain syllables and pausing at certain points.
It's like learning the beat of the language, the natural cadence that makes it sound musical and engaging.
Precisely. And the best way to practice is by listening to and mimicking native speakers. Find a short clip of someone speaking English from a podcast, a movie, even a YouTube video, and try to mirror their intonation and rhythm. Don't be afraid to exaggerate at first. It will feel more natural over time.
It's like learning a song by ear, paying attention to the subtleties that give it its unique sound. Another aspect of speaking naturally is mastering those common phrases and expressions that native speakers use all the time.
Native speakers often use phrases that don't always follow strict grammar rules, but sound perfectly natural in conversation. For example, instead of saying, "I am going to the store," you might hear, "I'm going to go to the store." It seems redundant on paper, but it's how people actually speak.
So it's about going beyond textbook English and absorbing the nuances of everyday speech, those little quirks that give a language its personality.
Exactly. It's like learning the slang and idioms that make a language come alive.
Now let's get practical. Finding opportunities to practice speaking can be a challenge, especially if you're not living in an English-speaking country. What did our sources suggest?
One of the best strategies is to look for a language exchange partner online. There are tons of websites and apps that connect you with people who want to learn your native language. And you can help each other practice.
That's a brilliant idea. It's a win-win. You both get to practice and learn from each other.
And if finding a partner feels daunting, remember you can always talk to yourself. Narrate your day, have imaginary conversations, practice different scenarios out loud. It might feel strange at first, but it's incredibly effective for getting those vocal cords warmed up and building confidence.
It's like having a built-in conversation partner always available for a quick chat in English. Our sources also recommended seeking out English-speaking clubs or groups in your local community.
Yes. Think book clubs, conversation groups, even online forums. The key is to find a space where you can use English regularly in a relaxed and supportive environment.
It's about creating those real-world opportunities to interact and use the language in a meaningful way. And speaking of real-world, our sources were big on the power of immersion, surrounding yourself with English as much as possible.
Immersion is like giving your brain a constant dose of English, allowing it to soak up the sounds, rhythms, and vocabulary naturally. Listen to English music, watch movies and TV shows, read books and articles. It's about making English a part of your daily life, not just something you study in isolation.
It's about transforming your environment into an English playground where you're constantly exposed to the language in fun and engaging ways.
Exactly. And the more you immerse yourself, the more effortless speaking English will become.
Now let's dive into some specific exercises and techniques that can really accelerate your fluency journey. Our sources had a treasure trove of ideas. What stood out to you?
One that I've personally found helpful is shadowing. It's where you listen to a native speaker and try to repeat what they're saying simultaneously, almost like your shadow.
Shadowing is a fantastic way to practice pronunciation, intonation, rhythm, and even speed all at once. It's like a full body workout for your English speaking skills. And you can shadow practically anything: podcasts, YouTube videos, even the news. Find something you enjoy listening to and start shadowing along.
Our sources recommended starting with short clips, maybe a minute or two at a time, to avoid feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah, small steps lead to big gains. And if the speaker's too fast, don't hesitate to slow down the audio. Most media players have a speed control feature. Another technique that intrigued me was paraphrasing. Could you explain how that works and why it's beneficial for fluency?
Paraphrasing involves taking information you've heard or read and rephrasing it in your own words. It's a fantastic way to test your comprehension, strengthen your vocabulary, and practice thinking in English.
So if you hear someone say, "The weather is absolutely gorgeous today," you might paraphrase it as, "It's a stunning day outside."
Exactly. You're conveying the same message but using different words and sentence structures. This exercise forces you to really grapple with the meaning and find alternative ways to express it. Don't worry about perfection. It's about flexing those mental muscles and experimenting with the language.
It's like taking a concept and putting your own unique spin on it, finding your voice in English. Our sources were also big fans of storytelling as a fluency booster.
Storytelling is a powerful way to practice speaking in complete sentences and expressing your thoughts and ideas clearly and engagingly. You can tell a story about something that happened to you, something you made up, or even retell a story you've heard.
It's about weaving words into a tapestry, creating a narrative that captures the listener's attention and sparks their imagination.
And it's incredibly beneficial for fluency because it helps you think on your feet, organize your thoughts, and find the right words to convey your message. It's like taking your language skills on an adventure, exploring different paths and possibilities.
We touched on role-playing earlier, but our sources suggested taking it a step further, making it more detailed and specific.
Role-playing is like a dress rehearsal for real-life situations. Instead of just general scenarios, create detailed scenes. If you're practicing ordering food, imagine the specific restaurant, the menu items, the potential questions the waiter might ask. If you're practicing a job interview, research common interview questions in your field and prepare your responses in English.
It's like turning those imaginary conversations into immersive experiences, preparing you for a wider range of real-world interactions. Another technique that our sources recommended was reading aloud.
Reading aloud is a classic for a reason. It's like a symphony for your ears, allowing you to appreciate the rhythm and musicality of the language. It helps you practice pronunciation, intonation, and rhythm, and get comfortable with the sound of your own voice in English.
It's like giving those words a voice, bringing them to life through your own interpretation and expression.
Precisely. And don't just read monotonously. Infuse your voice with emotion. If it's a question, make it sound like a question. If it's something exciting, let your enthusiasm shine through. This makes the practice more engaging and helps you develop a more natural and expressive speaking style.
It's like transforming those words on the page into a dynamic performance.
And speaking of performance, another technique that our sources suggested was recording yourself speaking English.
I know this one can feel a bit awkward at first, but it's incredibly valuable for self-assessment.
It's like having your own personal language coach providing you with instant feedback. By listening back to your recordings, you can identify areas where you need to improve, whether it's your pronunciation, intonation, rhythm, or even the speed at which you speak.
It's about becoming your own critic, but in a constructive way. The goal isn't to be perfect. It's to identify areas for growth and celebrate the progress you're making.
Exactly. Each recording becomes a snapshot of your journey, capturing your unique voice and highlighting the strides you're making towards fluency.
It's like creating a language learning time capsule, documenting your evolution as an English speaker.
Now, for something a little more lighthearted, our sources suggested incorporating tongue twisters into your practice routine.
Tongue twisters are a fun and effective way to improve pronunciation and articulation speed. They're like mini workouts for your tongue, challenging you to articulate those tricky sounds clearly and quickly.
Think of classics like "She sells seashells by the seashore" or "Peter Piper picked a peck of pickled peppers." They're designed to trip you up, but that's where the fun lies.
It's about embracing the challenge, pushing your pronunciation to the limit, and having a good laugh along the way.
And speaking of fun, our sources also suggested using flashcards for more than just vocabulary memorization.
Flashcards can be a dynamic tool for speaking practice. Instead of just testing your knowledge of words, use them to prompt spoken answers to questions or to spark spontaneous conversations.
Imagine having flashcards with questions like, "What did you do yesterday?" or "What's your favorite hobby?" You can practice answering out loud, focusing on fluency and natural expression. If you're practicing with a friend, you can take turns asking and answering the questions, making it a fun and interactive activity.
It's like turning flashcards into a language learning game, adding a playful element to your practice routine.
And speaking of games, another technique that stood out was dictation.
Dictation involves listening to someone speaking and writing down what they say, right?
Exactly. It's a fantastic way to sharpen your listening skills, expand your vocabulary, and improve your spelling. But it's also a great way to practice speaking. After you've written down what you heard, read it out loud, focusing on pronunciation and fluency. It's like taking those words from the page to your tongue, integrating them into your spoken vocabulary.
It's a multi-sensory learning experience that engages your ears, eyes, and voice.
Now let's talk about a technique that combines entertainment with learning, watching movies or TV shows with subtitles.
This is a fantastic way to immerse yourself in real-life dialogue and practice speaking along with native speakers.
You can read along with the subtitles, pausing and repeating lines to practice pronunciation and intonation. You can even try mimicking the actor's expressions and emotions, adding an element of acting to your language practice.
It's like having a front row seat to a language learning performance, learning from the pros.
And as you become more comfortable, try turning off the subtitles and see how much you can understand without them. Then you can practice repeating what you heard, testing your comprehension, and improving your speaking skills.
It's a gradual progression from reading to listening to speaking, building your confidence and fluency along the way.
And finally, our sources highlighted the often overlooked connection between writing and speaking.
Writing in English might seem like a separate skill, but it's incredibly beneficial for fluency development.
The more you write in English, the more you train your brain to think in the language. It's like building a mental muscle, strengthening your ability to form sentences, express ideas, and use vocabulary accurately.
It's like laying the foundation for fluent speech, creating a strong framework of grammar and vocabulary that you can then build upon when you speak.
And the beauty of writing is that you can do it anywhere, anytime. You can keep a journal, write short stories, compose emails in English, or even just jot down your thoughts and ideas throughout the day.
It's about making writing a part of your daily routine, a habit that helps you internalize the language and build fluency from the ground up.
And don't forget to read your writing out loud. This bridges the gap between writing and speaking, allowing you to hear how your words sound and fine-tune your pronunciation and intonation.
It's like giving your written words a voice, transforming them from silent thoughts to expressive speech.
And one last tip, don't be afraid to experiment. Have fun with the language, play with different styles and registers, and don't be afraid to make mistakes. The more you write, the more comfortable and fluent you'll become.
It's about embracing the freedom and creativity of language, expressing yourself authentically, and making English your own.
Now let's move on to one of the most enjoyable and effective techniques for fluency development, singing along to English songs.
Singing is a fantastic way to practice pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation in a fun and engaging way. Plus, music has this incredible ability to stick in our memories, helping us retain the words and phrases we learn.
It's like learning through osmosis, but with a melody. Choose songs you enjoy with clear lyrics and a pace you can keep up with. As you get more comfortable, you can try faster songs or songs with more complex lyrics.
It's about finding that sweet spot between challenge and enjoyment, pushing yourself while having a blast.
And don't worry about hitting those high notes or sounding like a professional singer. The goal is to practice the language, have fun, and let the music guide you towards fluency.
It's about embracing the joy of language learning, letting the rhythm and melody of English inspire you on your journey.
So we've explored a ton of techniques, from shadowing to singing along to our favorite tunes, but let's be real, becoming fluent takes dedication. It's a marathon, not a sprint, and we need strategies to stay motivated for the long haul.
It's like training for any big goal. You need a plan, a roadmap to guide you, and milestones to celebrate along the way. Our sources were big on setting SMART goals.
Specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. Those are the SMART ingredients. Instead of vaguely wishing to be fluent, get laser-focused by the end of next month. I want to comfortably have a 10-minute conversation about my hobbies in English. That's a goal you can track work towards and feel amazing about achieving.
I love how that breaks it down into bite-sized pieces. If 10 minutes feels daunting, start with 5, then work your way up. Each small win fuels your motivation for the next one.
And don't underestimate the power of celebrating those wins. Acknowledging your progress, no matter how small, reinforces that you're on the right track and keeps you going when things get tough. Speaking of which, our sources emphasize the ongoing nature of immersion.
This English bubble we talked about, it's not a one-time setup. It's about constantly finding ways to weave English into your daily life.
It's like turning your world into an English language playground. Keep those phone and computer settings in English, seek out English language podcasts, books, even switch your social media feed to follow more English-speaking creators. The more you surround yourself with the language, the more naturally it starts to seep in.
It becomes less like studying and more like breathing, just a natural part of your day.
Yeah.
But even with the best environment, we need to be consistent with our practice, right?
Absolutely. Think of it like building a muscle short. Regular workouts are far more effective than one massive session every now and then. Even 15-20 minutes a day consistently can make a huge difference.
It's finding that sweet spot between fitting it into your busy schedule and making it a habit you don't skip our sources. Also stress the importance of reviewing what we've learned. It's easy to feel like we're making progress, then suddenly realize we've forgotten things we thought we knew.
Review is like taking your language skills to the gym for a maintenance workout. It prevents those skills from getting rusty spaced repetition. Is a particularly effective technique.
So you review something a day after learning it, then a week later, then a month later, gradually increasing the intervals. It's like reminding your brain, hey, remember this. It's important.
Exactly. And those review sessions don't have to be boring. Rewatch a favorite English movie, listen to a podcast you enjoyed, revisit those flashcards, make it enjoyable, and you're more likely to stick with it.
Now, there's one mental hurdle we need to talk about. The fear of making mistakes.
Yeah.
It's like this invisible wall that holds so many learners back from truly progressing.
It's natural to feel apprehensive about making mistakes, especially in front of others. But here's the thing, mistakes are inevitable. They're how we learn. Think back to learning to walk. You didn't give up after the first stumble, did you?
Those stumbles were part of the process. They taught us how to find our balance.
Exactly. The more you embrace those stumbles in language learning, view them as feedback rather than failures, the faster you'll progress. And a positive attitude goes a long way.
Our sources talked about cultivating a growth mindset when it comes to language learning.
It's about seeing challenges not as roadblocks, but as opportunities for growth. Celebrate your progress, no matter how small. And be kind to yourself when you hit a snag. And don't compare your journey to others. Everyone learns at their own pace.
It's your unique adventure, and every step forward is a victory worth celebrating now on this journey. It could be incredibly helpful to have a companion, someone to share the ups and downs with.
A language partner can be a game changer. It doesn't have to be a native speaker, just someone who's also learning English, or even someone learning a different language altogether. The key is to practice regularly, support each other's goals, and celebrate each other's wins.
It's like having a language learning buddy, someone to motivate you, practice with, and share those aha moments with.
And if finding a partner in person is difficult, there's a whole world of online language learning communities waiting to welcome you. Forums, chat groups, online language exchange platforms, the possibilities are endless. Social media is also a fantastic resource. Connect with other learners, share tips and resources, and practice your English in a supportive and engaging environment.
It's like having a virtual support group for your language learning journey, with people from all over the world who share your passion.
And of course, if you thrive in a more structured environment, consider joining an English class or working with a tutor.
Having a teacher or tutor can provide valuable guidance, feedback, and that extra push to stay accountable.
Now, beyond structured practice and immersion, one of the most powerful ways to boost fluency is to use English in real-world situations.
It's like taking your language skills out for a test drive, seeing how they perform on the open road.
Exactly. Seek out opportunities to use English in authentic settings if you travel. Try speaking English with locals at a restaurant. Order your food in English. If you work with English-speaking colleagues, engage them in conversations.
It's about stepping outside your comfort zone, embracing those moments of, oh, I can actually do this.
And even if you're not in an English-speaking environment, you can create opportunities for real-world practice. Talk to yourself in English, read out loud, pretend you're giving a presentation. The key is to use the language actively, not just passively absorb it.
It's about turning everyday moments into language learning opportunities, flexing those English muscles, and building your confidence.
And remember, fluency doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process that requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to embrace the journey.
Our sources emphasize the importance of not getting discouraged if you don't see results immediately.
Fluency is a marathon, not a sprint. There will be times when you feel like you're hitting a plateau or even taking a step back. But as long as you keep moving forward, keep practicing, keep believing in yourself, you will get there.
It's about trusting the process, enjoying the ride, and celebrating those hard-earned victories along the way.
Absolutely. Be kind to yourself, acknowledge your progress, and remember why you started this journey in the first place.
Whether it's for professional growth, travel adventures, personal fulfillment, or simply the joy of expanding your horizons, keeping your goals in mind will fuel your motivation and guide you towards fluency.
And if you ever feel lost or overwhelmed, remember that you're not alone. There's a vast network of resources available to support you. Teachers, tutors, online communities. Fellow learners, don't hesitate to ask for help, seek guidance, and connect with the others who share your passion for learning English.
It's about tapping into that collective wisdom, leveraging the power of community, and recognizing that we're all in this together. Fluency isn't just an individual pursuit, it's a shared journey of growth, discovery, and connection. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground techniques, mindset shifts, building that English bubble around ourselves. What does this all mean for our listener who is ready to take action?
Yeah, it's been a deep dive, hasn't it? And the biggest takeaway, I think, is this fluency isn't some magical talent reserved for a select few. It's achievable step by step for anyone willing to put in the effort and make it fun.
That's what's been so exciting, exploring all these different approaches. It's not about one right way. It's about finding what clicks for you.
Precisely. Maybe you're a music lover who learns best through catchy lyrics, or a movie buff who picks up phrases by mimicking your favorite actors, or maybe you thrive on the structure of shadowing exercises. The point is, there's a path to fluency that aligns with your personality and interests.
And if there's one thing that ties all these successful approaches together, it's mindset, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. It's that growth mindset we talked about, embracing those inevitable stumbles as feedback, celebrating even the smallest victories, and remembering that progress isn't always linear.
Yeah, it's like those inspirational posters, but for language learning. Fall down 7 times, get up 8. It's about resilience, that belief that you can become fluent even when it feels challenging.
And that's where having a support system can be so valuable. Whether it's a language partner, a tutor, an online community, knowing you're not alone on this journey makes a huge difference.
It's like having a team of cheerleaders in your corner, reminding you why you started and encouraging you to keep going.
Now, I'm curious what resonates most with you from everything we've discussed. What feels like that aha moment, the technique you're excited to try?
I'm personally intrigued by the chef in the kitchen method for narrating daily routines. It adds a level of detail and intention that I think would really push me to think and speak more precisely. What about you?
I'm a big fan of shadowing. It's amazing how mimicking native speakers can help you internalize those subtle nuances of rhythm and intonation that make your speech sound more natural. But honestly, every technique has its own strengths. The key is to experiment, find what works best for you, and keep that practice consistent.
Consistency is key. It's like building any new habit. Small steps repeated over time lead to remarkable results. And one last thought I'd like to share. Don't underestimate the power of simply enjoying the process.
That's such an important point. Learning English shouldn't feel like a chore. It's about opening yourself up to a whole new world of communication, connection, and experiences. So find what sparks your interest, whether it's music, movies, books, or conversations with new people, and let that passion fuel your journey.
Because ultimately, fluency isn't just about speaking perfect English. It's about using the language to connect with others,
Yeah.
express yourself authentically, and live a richer, more fulfilling life.
Beautifully said. It's been a joy exploring these ideas with you today.
Likewise. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into English fluency. We hope you've gained valuable insights and inspiration to take your language skills to the next level. Remember, every step you take, no matter how small, brings you closer to your goals. Keep practicing, stay motivated, and most importantly, enjoy the journey. Thank you for listening to the Speak Smart podcast, and subscribe my channel, like the hit button.